The gas station sat at the edge of a desolate highway, the kind of place where travelers only stopped out of necessity. The neon sign flickered against the darkening sky, casting a ghostly glow over the cracked asphalt. Inside the small repair garage, David Kane, a burly man with weathered hands, wiped grease from his fingers as he leaned against the workbench. His face bore the scars of battles long past, though no one in this sleepy town knew his story. For the locals, Kane was just the mechanic, quiet, reserved, and fiercely private. He kept to himself, speaking only when necessary. What no one realized was that Kane had once been a soldier, a ghost in the most dangerous military units, specializing in missions too brutal to be spoken of. He had walked away from that life, determined to bury the demons of his past. But the past has a way of catching up. The night was still when the rumble of motorcycles broke the silence. Kane looked up, his sharp eyes narrowing as a gang of 5 men roared into the station. Their leader, a wiry man with a snake tattoo coiling around his neck, dismounted with a swagger. The others followed, their faces hidden beneath helmets, but their demeanor screamed trouble. Kane didn't flinch as the men approached. He knew their type, predators who preyed on the weak. They sauntered into the station, their boots echoing on the concrete. "Hey, grease monkey," Snakeneck sneered, slapping the hood of a nearby car. "We need some gas, and maybe a little entertainment." Kane's gaze was cold, unflinching. "The pump's out front. Help yourselves." Snakeneck grinned, flashing yellowed teeth. "Oh, we're helping ourselves, all right? To more than gas. You see, we like to make friends wherever we go." His tone was mocking, but Kane detected the underlying threat. He stood straight, his massive frame casting a shadow over the smaller man. "You're not welcome here." The gang leader's grin faded. He glanced back at his crew, who chuckled darkly, emboldened by their numbers. "Is that right?" Snakeneck growled. "You sure you want to talk to us like that, old man?" Kane didn't respond. His silence was unnerving, a vacuum that seemed to draw all the noise from the room. The gang didn't wait for an invitation. One of the men lunged forward, a crowbar in hand. The swing was wild, aimed to intimidate rather than harm. Kane sidestepped with precision, his movements almost mechanical. The crowbar smashed into the workbench, splintering wood. "Big mistake," Kane muttered, his voice low and menacing. Before the thug could react, Kane grabbed his wrist and twisted it sharply. The man screamed as the crowbar clattered to the floor. Kane's knee shot up, driving into the thug's stomach with bone-crushing force. The man crumpled, gasping for air. The garage exploded into chaos. Snakeneck shouted orders as the others charged. Kane met them head-on, his years of training taking over. He moved like a predator, each strike calculated and devastating. A wrench became an extension of his hand, swinging with brutal efficiency. Bones cracked, and screams echoed through the night. But Kane wasn't just fighting. He was remembering. With every punch, the memories flooded back. The ambush in Kandahar, the Black Ops mission that went south, the faces of comrades lost. The rage he had buried for years erupted, turning him into the weapon he had once been. "Is this all you've got?" He growled, his voice a mix of fury and contempt. Another thug lunged at him with a knife. Kane disarmed him in a blur of motion, snapping the blade in two with his bare hands before delivering a brutal headbutt. By the time Snakeneck realized his gang was losing, it was too late. The leader scrambled for the door, but Kane was faster. He grabbed the man by his jacket and slammed him against the wall. "Who sent you?" Kane demanded, his voice cold as steel. Snakeneck stammered, his bravado gone. "We were just passing through, man. I swear." Kane's grip tightened. Wrong answer. As the gang limped away, Kane stood amidst the wreckage of the fight, his chest heaving. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving a familiar emptiness in its wake. He looked down at his hands, slick with blood, not all of it his own. For years, he had tried to escape the man he once was, but tonight proved that the ghost of David Kane, the soldier, still lingered beneath the surface. The distant wail of sirens pulled him from his thoughts. He needed to clean up to make sure no questions were asked. He had made too many enemies in his old life to risk attention now. But as Kane locked the station and retreated into the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Trouble had found him once, and it wouldn't stop until it had consumed everything. The following morning, the gas station was eerily quiet. Kane worked on an old pickup truck, his knuckles still bruised from the fight. He moved mechanically, his mind replaying the events of the previous night. He should have felt victorious, but instead, a gnawing unease settled in his chest. These types never let things go. Across town, in a dimly lit bar, Snakeneck nursed his broken ribs and bruised pride. His crew slumped around him, their faces sullen and defeated. But Snakeneck's anger burned hotter than his pain. He spat blood onto the floor, slamming his fist against the table. "No one does that to me," he growled. "Especially not some washed-up grease monkey." One of his men, a burly thug with a scar running down his cheek, shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, that guy, he wasn't normal. Did you see how he moved? Like he's done this 1,000 times." Snakeneck sneered. "I don't care who he is. No one embarrasses me and gets away with it." The bartender, an old-timer with a cigarette dangling from his lips, leaned in. "You're talking about Kane, aren't you?" Snakeneck's eyes narrowed. "You know him?" The bartender chuckled darkly. "Everyone around here knows him, but no one knows much. Keeps to himself. Quiet guy. Used to get visitors, though military types. Always thought there was more to him." Snakeneck leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Military, huh? Maybe we should dig into his past." The bartender shrugged. "Do what you want, but if you're smart, you'll leave him alone." Snakeneck ignored the warning. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Hours later, Snakeneck and his crew regrouped. This time, they weren't alone. A convoy of vehicles rolled into the bar's parking lot, headlights slicing through the night. From the trucks emerged a dozen men, grizzled bikers with leather jackets and cold eyes. Their leader, a mountain of a man known as Gordo, greeted Snakeneck with a bone-crushing handshake. "You said you needed backup," Gordo rumbled. "And you're paying good money. What's the job?" Snakeneck grinned. "Just a little message for someone who doesn't know his place. He humiliated me. I want him to feel pain." Gordo smirked. "Pain's what we do best." Together, the group plotted their attack. They would strike at night when the station was closed, catching Kane off guard. It wasn't just about retaliation, it was about sending a message. That evening, Kane stood outside the gas station, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was heavy, charged with a tension he couldn't shake. He sensed something was coming. He locked the garage and headed to his small trailer behind the station. Inside, the space was sparse but meticulously organized. A bed, a table, and a few personal belongings. On the wall hung a photo of his old unit, a younger Kane, flanked by brothers-in-arms who weren't alive anymore. He ran a hand over his face, trying to push the memories away. He had chosen this quiet life to escape the violence, but peace was proving harder to hold onto than he'd thought. Suddenly, he heard the faint rumble of engines. His body tensed. The sound grew louder, closer. He walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Headlights pierced the darkness, a line of vehicles snaking toward the station. The convoy stopped just outside the station. Men poured out, armed with bats, chains, and crowbars. Gordo barked orders, his voice booming over the sound of revving engines. Kane stepped out of his trailer, calm despite the sight before him. His mind raced, assessing the situation. He was outnumbered, but not outmatched. He had faced worse odds. "Come out and play, old man," Snake Neck shouted, stepping to the front of the group. His voice dripped with malice. "We've got some unfinished business." Kane didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the garage, pulling the heavy steel door shut behind him. The gang took this as a retreat and erupted in laughter. "He's scared," one of them jeered. But inside the garage, Kane wasn't hiding. He was preparing. As the gang surrounded the garage, Kane moved quickly, gathering tools and supplies. He didn't have weapons, but he didn't need them. A length of pipe, a crowbar, and a toolbox became his arsenal. When the gang broke through the garage door, Kane struck like a coiled viper. The first man through the door was met with a wrench to the temple, dropping him instantly. The others surged forward, but Kane was a blur, his movements precise and devastating. Outside, Gordo watched the chaos unfold, his confidence wavering. "What the hell is this guy?" he muttered. Snake Neck, too stubborn to back down, grabbed a chain and charged inside. Kane met him head-on, dodging the wild swing and countering with a brutal uppercut that sent Snake Neck crashing to the ground. The fight spilled out into the open lot. Kane used the environment to his advantage, weaving between vehicles and using anything he could find as a weapon. The gang's numbers meant nothing against his skill and experience. But then Gordo entered the fray. The towering biker was slower than Kane but made up for it in sheer strength. He swung a metal pipe, narrowly missing Kane's head. The force of the blow dented a car door, showing just how dangerous he was. Kane dodged and countered, but Gordo was relentless. For the first time, Kane felt the sting of a hit as the pipe connected with his ribs. He staggered, but his eyes burned with determination. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was survival. In the end, it was Kane's resolve that won. Using a makeshift weapon, a jack handle, he disarmed Gordo and delivered a final, crushing blow that left the biker unconscious. The rest of the gang, battered and broken, fled into the night, dragging their fallen comrades with them. Kane stood amidst the wreckage, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. He watched as the convoy of vehicles disappeared down the highway, the sound of engines fading into the distance. For now, the station was quiet again. But Kane knew this wasn't over. He had sent a message, but messages have consequences. 2 days after the attack, the gas station was back in working order, though traces of the battle remained. Kane had cleaned up the debris, patched the garage door, and replaced shattered windows. For now, business was quiet. Locals came and went, none asking about the bruises on Kane's face or the dents in the pavement. They knew better than to pry. But Kane's instincts told him this wasn't over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sound of tires crunching gravel drew his attention. A black SUV rolled into the station. The vehicle was sleek, government-issued, its windows tinted so dark they mirrored the fading light. Kane stepped out of the garage, wiping grease from his hands. The driver's door opened, and a man in a sharp suit stepped out. "Kane," the man said, his voice calm but authoritative. He removed his sunglasses, revealing piercing blue eyes. "It's been a while." Kane's jaw tightened. "Agent Daniels." Daniels smiled faintly, still as direct as ever. "You've made quite a mess out here." Kane crossed his arms, unimpressed. "What do you want?" Daniel's smile faded. "You've been off the grid for years, but now you're back on it. Word travels fast when someone like you shows their hand. The gang you humiliated? They're connected to a larger organization, one we've been watching for a long time." Kane's eyes narrowed. "I don't care about your organization. I didn't start this fight." Daniels tilted his head. "Maybe not, but you ended it and now they want blood. We've intercepted chatter. They're calling in someone special." Kane's stomach sank. He knew what Daniels meant. Professional. Snakeneck's humiliation had reached the ears of a man far more dangerous than any gang leader. In a smoky underground club in Chicago, a phone buzzed on the bar. A man in a leather jacket picked it up, his tattooed fingers gripping the device. His name was Viktor Reznov, a former Spetsnaz operative turned mercenary. Known in the underworld as the Butcher, Viktor was infamous for his efficiency and brutality. The message was short: target, David Kane, $250,000.
Viktor smirked.
He'd heard of Kane, a ghost from military lore, someone whispered about in dark corners. Taking him down would be a challenge, but Viktor relished challenges. He grabbed his knife from the bar, sliding it into a sheath. Let's see if the ghost bleeds. Back at the gas station, Daniels lingered, leaning against the SUV. I could help you, Kane, he said, breaking the silence. You don't have to fight this alone. Kane shook his head. I don't need your help, and I don't trust you. Last time we worked together, I lost men. Daniels flinched but quickly recovered. And now you're trying to run from it all, hiding out here? That won't stop what's coming. These people won't stop until you're dead. Kane turned away, his voice cold. If they come, I'll handle it. Daniels hesitated, then nodded. He slid a small card onto the counter. If you change your mind, call me. Just know they're not sending amateurs this time. When Daniels drove off, Kane glanced at the card before tossing it into the trash. He didn't trust suits, but Daniels wasn't wrong. This fight wasn't over. That night, Kane prepared for war. He turned the garage into a fortress, barricading windows and welding steel plates to reinforce the doors. His tools became weapons, nails fashioned into caltrops, pipes sharpened into spears. He unearthed an old trunk buried beneath the trailer. Inside were remnants of his past: a tactical vest, a knife, and a weathered handgun with a single magazine. He donned the vest, the weight of it both familiar and suffocating. As he strapped the knife to his thigh, he caught his reflection in the cracked mirror. The man staring back wasn't the quiet mechanic anymore. He was the soldier, the ghost. Viktor didn't waste time. 3 days after accepting the contract, he arrived at the station under the cover of night. His approach was silent, his footsteps muffled by the dirt road. He scoped the area, noting the reinforced garage and the darkened trailer. A faint smile crossed his lips. Kane was ready, but so was he. Viktor set the first trap, a small, improvised explosive placed near the fuel tanks. He wanted to flush Kane out, to force him into the open where he could finish the job quickly. But Kane wasn't so easily outmaneuvered. The explosion rocked the station, flames licking the sky. Viktor watched from a distance, expecting to see Kane emerge. Instead, he felt a cold steel blade press against his throat. Looking for me? Kane growled. Viktor's eyes widened. He hadn't even heard him move. In a swift motion, Viktor twisted free, striking Kane with an elbow. The two men squared off, circling each other like predators. Viktor drew a knife, while Kane grabbed a wrench from his belt. The fight was brutal, silent save for the sound of blows landing and the crunch of gravel underfoot. Both men were evenly matched, their movements calculated and deadly. As Kane gained the upper hand, slamming Viktor against a rusted truck, headlights appeared in the distance. A convoy of vehicles approached, engines roaring. Snakeneck and his gang had returned, bringing reinforcements. Kane cursed under his breath. He was outnumbered, and now he had two enemies to contend with. But Viktor surprised him. They're not my allies, he spat, wiping blood from his lip. They're amateurs. If they get in my way, I'll kill them too. For a brief moment, an uneasy alliance formed. Kane and Viktor stood side by side as the gang surrounded them. Kane glanced at the mercenary. If we survive this, I'm still taking you down.
Viktor smirked.
If we survive, you'll have to catch me first. The final confrontation was chaos. Kane and Victor fought with unmatched precision, taking down gang members with brutal efficiency. Victor's knife was a blur of motion, while Kane used his tools with deadly force. Despite their differences, they moved like a well-oiled machine, a reminder of the soldiers they once were. As dawn broke, the last of the gang fled, leaving behind a scene of carnage. Kane turned to Victor, exhausted but ready to finish what they started. But Victor was already gone, disappearing into the morning light. All that remained was a blood-stained note in his place. Until next time, Ghost. Kane stood alone in the wreckage of the gas station. The battle was over, but the war wasn't. Victor was still out there, and Kane knew this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. As he cleaned up the debris, he couldn't help but wonder how long he could keep running from the life he tried so hard to leave behind. But one thing was certain: the mechanic was no longer hiding.